Just yesterday, I was watching season 2 of The Simpsons. I was going all the way back and trying to see about the season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, etc. And I came across the episode Homer versus the Eighth Commandment. And I thought, this is a fantastic episode. This is an episode that feels like what The Simpsons should be. And yet we are so far removed from that in 2023. It's almost uncanny. It's like we stepped into a wormhole, and now most adult animation isn't even close to being that well written. What we have now are adult quote-unquote animations that are all wannabe South Parks in terms of how over the top they are. The Simpsons had balance back in the day. It had good writing, it had good gags, they made fun of pretty much everybody, and it was fun. Nowadays, everything is about how nihilistic things are, portraying the modern family as bad because that's more quote-unquote realistic, and more degenerate because that's more quote-unquote realistic. You know, that whole episode, they dealt with realistic issues. That whole season, those first 2 seasons, dealt with a lot of realistic family issues, but they were also still hilarious. The show didn't take itself overly seriously, but yet it still conveyed a good, relatable message. It wasn't trying to single anybody out. It was just portraying a really good, relatable, overall message that was cultural at the time. But things have changed so drastically, you wouldn't recognize the culture we lived in. If you had been knocked out and you woke up, if you had been knocked out since the 1990s and you woke up in 2023, you would think you were in a different world. You recognize some of the places, maybe, but it's a totally different world. And today's adult animation is no different. It's unrecognizable from what it once used to be. It wasn't always about being vulgar and having characters that are terrible people and being so over the top that it's ridiculous. No, South Park started that trend. And they were one of the only ones that was uber successful with it. The rest of them are just extremely divisive, whether they're popular or not. You can like Rick and Morty and Hell of a Boss, and I made a video talking about why I don't like either of them. But they don't have the universal appeal that something like The Simpsons once did. They don't have that. They have an audience, they have a fan base, but you have to understand that that is very specific people who like a very specific humor, whereas The Simpsons could appeal to pretty much everybody, depending on the episode. That universal appeal and that strive for universal appeal is gone. Modern adult animation only caters to people who like almost pseudo-edgelord humor. Everything that's edgy and degenerate and weird, and it aims for the outcasts of society and it tries to make them feel good. That's what I feel like they're trying to do. It's not trying to have any sort of universal appeal because it doesn't care about universal appeal. The writers want to insert themselves into everything that they do. Back in the day, writers used to take elements of their life and put them into shows, but they were relatable elements as opposed to the most extreme of extremes and their own personal viewpoints at every possible corner. Yeah, sure, they shared political opinions every now and again, but they usually offered the countervailing opinion so that it didn't look like it was insanely biased like it does today. Right now, you see these people who are constantly, they're on the left attacking the right in writing, and they're doing that again and again. And so they're separating their audiences, they're dividing their audiences. They only want people who ideologically agree with them, and it bleeds through their creations. So they think, okay, so South Park satirizes political figures and pop culture figures, right? We can do that. But they don't do it like South Park does. South Park says nobody's off limits, whereas these people say, well, we like these people and these ideas, so we'll leave them alone. South Park doesn't do that. And that's where they fail. And I am no fan of South Park. I dislike South Park very strongly because of what they've done to a lot of the animation landscape, which admittedly is not their fault. It's amazing that the show is still going, but it has a dedicated fan base, regardless of how I feel about it. But it is largely responsible for a lot of the knockoffs, for lack of a better term, that you're seeing today. And knockoffs that fail to understand why the audience that likes South Park does. I understand, as somebody who doesn't dislike the series, why people like it. I can understand that from a perspective. I can't understand why people like shows like Rick and Morty and Hell of a Boss and Praise Petey. Does anybody even like that show? That's a new one that came out. Anybody even heard of it? Royal Crackers. I don't even know how people feel about that. That's another new one that came out on Adult Swim. I haven't heard much about it. I think it got 2 seasons, and then who knows? I thought I had seen that it had gotten renewed, but I think that's Adult Swim's newest series. But all of these different series where you go into them and they all have the exact same, let's be as over the top and as degenerate as possible humor, and we'll call that adult. Whereas, if you've been alive long enough, you have shows like The Early Simpsons, The Critic, which is my all-time personal favorite. You've got King of the Hill, you've got Futurama before the Hulu stuff. The Hulu stuff is another discussion for another day. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's a very much mixed bag. I'll have to talk about it when the season is finally over. But you had those, you had early Family Guy, which wasn't terrible, you had American Dad. You have all of these shows that tried to do something unique, and then they all kind of, the longer they went on, the more they went into the, we have to be adult trope. We have to be over the top. We have to be vulgar. The families have to be nothing but a group of degenerates, because that's more realistic. And I'm just repeating myself at this point. It's just the same problem over and over again. That's my problem with modern adult animation. What happened to good storytelling? What happened to not relying on the most immature aspects of quote-unquote humor to tell your stories? What happened to characters that actually mean something, as opposed to trying to make us feel something for characters that are objectively not good people? You know, that do horrible things, like they kill people, they hurt people, why do we care? Like the Smith family from Rick and Morty. I mentioned this in the video I made about Rick and Morty and Hell of a Boss. Why do we care about objectively terrible, morally characters? But yet some people do. So it's just something I don't understand, apparently. But it doesn't draw me to these shows. I don't want to watch new adult animated series because I know they're just going to fall into it. Now, it seems like, and I haven't watched the series, I'll do a review when I do, but it seems like Bob's Burgers is a bit of an exception. It seems like they're trying to balance things out a little bit better in terms of the quote-unquote adult humor, based on what I've seen in the early seasons, but I don't know where it goes. Somebody will have to let me know if it's worth watching through and if they actually balance things out or not. It seems more grounded, but I don't honestly know. These days, if a show is adult animation, they have to go extremely over the top, and I can't take that anymore. I really can't. That's why I don't give a lot of new shows the time of day. I've watched through Rick and Morty and Hell of a Boss, and I haven't watched any of the other new ones. I keep trying to think that maybe there was one that I'm missing, but I haven't watched through any. I haven't seen Has Been Hotel, which is what Hell of a Boss is spin off of, and I don't particularly care to, even though it's not fully out. I think I saw that pilot episode and just got bored. I don't particularly care because I know what I'm going to get. But I will gladly watch King of the Hill. I will gladly watch old Simpsons, maybe the first season or two of Family Guy. I will gladly watch old American Dad, or American Dad up to a certain point. That show's kind of fallen off a little bit, but it's still not... I don't think American Dad is offensively terrible. There's some episodes I can't watch. Same with most of these series. But I think it's pretty alright. I can't watch Modern Family Guy. Oh my gosh, I can't. No. Absolutely not. Bob's Burgers, again, is one of those ones where I haven't sat down and devoted to watching it to really come to a conclusion. The stuff I've seen I like, but I just don't know on an episode-by-episode basis if it falls into this trap consistently or not. It seems like it doesn't, and that's why I kind of want to sit down and sort of marathon the seasons. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. So anyways, let me know what you think about this modern adult animation landscape and what your problems are with it and so on and so forth in the comments down below. I will see you guys next time. This has been Super Koopa TV with another edition of Toonie Talk. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.